So anyways, back to it. So like I said, this is an example of using, the rule of thirds with like a vertical photo. Try to experiment using rule of thirds as a way to vary your compositions, so they're not like all very staticky looking. No pun intended with like how staticky this photo is. Another thing in not just photography but art in general, they call it the Fibonacci sequence. It's more easily identified as a golden ratio. It's a ratio of proportions that increase in sequential size. As you can see, like starts here and it goes up by a very specific 1.6 something 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 amount, and it just repeats that over and over and over again. You see this a lot in nature, and there's a lot of theories behind it. Math people love studying it. There's like PhDs on it. The thing is that we naturally are kind of drawn aesthetically to things that follow not just symmetry, but like this golden ratio. And it's also something you can kind of bring into photography when it comes to composition. When you're thinking of like placement of natural things, the golden ratio is amazing. When you're thinking of placement of like, humans, animals, subjects instead of objects, that would be the best way to put it. If it's like a subject, something like living with eyes or whatever, putting it within, the crosshairs of the rule of thirds will give you like a more interesting composition. But when it comes to nature or an object, finding that arrangement of like golden ratio also gives you like a very interesting photo. As you can see here, like the sunset, they could have just had the sun in the middle and like called it a day. But by having it slightly over here, it's not just doing the rule of thirds, it's also following the Fibonacci sequence. So, it's a more naturally appealing photo, if that makes sense. Here's like an example of that. Like I went to Balboa and took a couple of photos there for an example for this shoot. And here was like some of the ducks in the pond. I made sure to shoot them with my crosshairs on. And I made sure to not shoot it until like the duck's head was like right in the center of this crosshair over here. So what that does is that allows me to have this dynamic scene of like, there's this duck, it has direction, you can see the ripples, so like there's movement, it's like moving this way. There's plenty of negative space, so it's like gives you room to breathe. You obviously know where like the target, the subject is. This would be an example of like a traditionally appropriate use of the rule of thirds. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay, so here's an example again with a subject, a person, a living thing, right, between the crosshairs using the rule of thirds. So 1/3 is subject, 2/3 is background. I tried to shoot like in a slightly wide aperture, maybe like f4. So not everything is crazy like blurred, but you can still tell that the background is breathing room. You weren't meant to see this because it's blurry. All the sharpness kind of comes to the subject. And, it's following that area that rule of thirds that as long as we keep the subject here, that negative space, it also kind of shares that, like, it gives us what the subject was kind of seeing. So, it lets us like kind of relate more to the image and making it a little more interesting because you can see like, oh, what is he looking at? What's around him? So you don't see it all exactly, but you have a sense of space. For the assignment, I'm going to want you to know a little bit of like color theory. So if you haven't had color theory before, this is an intro too. Like this is just a very brief intro to color theory. So in photography, because we print and we display, we're going to use words like shades, tones, and tints when it comes to the color, the chroma of something. So for one of your photos that I want you to take, I want you to make, well, obviously like minimum 10, but choose one of a subject that's monochromatic. Anybody know what mono means?
One.
Correct. Thank you. So one color, one chroma. For an example, like, you know, this close-up of like this yellow rose. It doesn't share any other color. Even though it has shadows, highlights, color, what is important is that it stays in the yellow. So to better understand shades, tones, and tints, let's talk about this one. So this is the easiest way to understand the color theory when it comes to shades, tones, and tints. Anything that's a tint is the color plus white. So the hue is obviously, the hue is the color itself. The tint is adding white to it. The tone is going to always be your grays. So it's the color plus gray. And then the shade is always going to be the color plus black. So whenever you see anybody talk about like tint, tone, or shade, they're referring to the color plus either white, gray, or black. So here's an example of the, you know, the monochromatic photo of the yellow. These highlights, you would say that tint of yellow. Over here, it's like a shade of yellow. And, you know, you kind of leave the neutral like alone. It's just yellow. Here's another example of a monochromatic photo. I didn't mean for it to be so like compressed. So I'm going to show you guys how to export images so they're not compressed like this. So do as I say, not as I do. So here's a really good example of a monochromatic photo. It doesn't just have to be literally one color, one shade, one tint. It can be, you know, this very compressed atmospheric pressure image of a mountain range that makes it all look blue. But like how we're seeing, there's shades of blue, there's tints of blue, there's just like the regular hues of blue. So like this would be like a good example of another kind of monochromatic photo. Monochromatic can also mean black and white. So if you choose your monochromatic to be black and white, that's a monochromatic photo. Complementary. Complementary on the color wheel means colors that are across from each other. So we say they complement each other. So in this example, what's across from yellow would be purple. As you can see, this like kind of example of this yellow flower with a blue background. You can also like kind of take a photo like pointing at the sky or something. The point is that the image that I want you to take is going to have two colors, but they need to be complementary colors. So you can stage this, you can find this in nature. The point is to be able to identify complementary colors and then compose any kind of image with these to in it. If you have any doubt as to what's color complementary, just Google any color wheel, and whatever is across from it is going to be the complement to it. You can either reference these, take a picture of this with your phone, and this is the most basic color wheel that you'll find. Do you guys have any questions as far as complementary colors? No? Yes? No? Okay. So yeah, so one of the photos that you're going to want to take, well, one of the sets of photos is going to be complementary. So there's an example of finding complementary colors in nature. You know, green and red are across each other in on the color wheel. So, you know, I kind of took advantage of that and found these mushrooms and these jade plants. If anybody knows what kind of plant that is, I want to say they're jade plants. But yeah, so this is an example of complementary colors, because you have the reds, you have the greens, they're all in one composition. Like, this is good. Find stuff like this. You may want to do a nature walk. Go to like a flower garden. Go to even like with clothing, even with kids. You be creative. As long as you have like the photo with two complementary colors in it, you're good. Analogous colors. These are colors that are in a sequence on the color wheel. So how we see here, the analogous colors, if we choose yellow, it would be green and then like, you know, that golden orange. And they don't have to exactly be like right next to each other. They can like move around closely. So it's just kind of like the colors that are in a row, like sequentially from each other. An example would be, you know, kind of like an ear of corn. This macro of the ear of corn is going to have that green, that yellow, and then the shades of the yellow are gonna look a little more golden. Do you guys have any questions as far as analogous? All right, that makes sense. Have you guys done color theory before? Okay.
A little bit.
For those types of pictures, what's the name of the project one?
Project 1.
Yeah, but which one would that be out of the options?
This one might not be analogous. I just kind of wanted you guys to know color theory. The ones that are in the project are split complementary. Complementary colors and complementary and monochromatic.
I didn't see the monochromatic on that thing.
Well, we'll go over it right now. Just so you guys know, again, this is just for your guys' knowledge. Split complementary, same thing. You get two colors that are closely close together, and then you find that opposite of them. So in this case, you have the two colors that are analogous, and then like the one complementary. All right. So that's just like basic intro to color theory. So you guys are aware, like when you're seeing that in nature, just so like it comes into your head, like, oh, like I can identify that now. That's something I could probably use for later. These are going to be though in your assignment. So one of the photos I'm going to want you to do is to find pattern, rhythm, and repetition. So pattern is a combination of elements that are repeated and occurring in a regular arrangement. So, like a bunch of houses in a cul-de-sac, get them right at the right angle, and they're all gonna be a pattern. But try to find any kind of different pattern. I was hesitant to show you examples, but I am gonna show you examples just because I don't want to influence what you choose. But I would really like for you to identify patterns in like nature and architecture out in the field. So hand up.
I was gonna ask, can you make your own rhythm? Maybe
Yeah, you can stage it too.
Because my dad had a lot of bottles, so I could maybe line up a bunch of
Perfect.
bottles.
So yeah, be creative. Like, I like finding things in nature, but also stage. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You should learn how to stage because you're going to be learning how to pose, and if you take intermediate, how to stage light for flash photography. So stage if you have to. Take a walk. If you don't find it, make it. So rhythm is close to pattern, except rhythm has, a break in the elements. So as where, the pattern is rooftop, rooftop antenna, rooftop antenna. Pattern is, pillar, 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 bird, pillar, 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 bird. So I did give an example of that. So I also I bought a new toy, so I forgot to take off the watermark on it. I was shooting with the new Insta 360 Ace Pro 2. It's supposed to be like a 50 megapixel like pocket camera, so I kind of took it for a test drive. Trying to shoot examples for you guys. I'll get rid of the watermarks later. But so this would be an example of a pattern. There's no breaks in the pattern. It's just like literally, bars, 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 nails, nail, nail. So this would be like kind of an example of that. So this would be repetition. And then could someone tell me like what the rhythm break is here that separates it from repetition? The little Bowie, right? Yeah. So see how it's like boat, pillar, boat, pillar, boat, pillar, boat, pillar. So here it's like boat, pillar, Bowie, boat, pillar. Same thing over here, boat, pillar, no boat, pillar. So this one has rhythm to it. It's not as it doesn't repeat like this one does. So these are also some of the photos that you're gonna want one of at least for your 10. Did you guys understand? Yeah, so I want you to minimum try to take 10 and then pick the best one that represents.
Oh, so each of them doesn't have to be unique?
No. So try to not. If it happens, it happens. But try to vary it, because you're gonna want to pick the best one that represents that category.
So you pick 10 of the same, but pick the one that you think is the best.
But make it different enough to where it's not literally just 10 of the same thing.
Like 10 different angles.
Like from different
Yeah, different angles, different
Right.
subject.
Positions,
Yeah.
see which one looks better.
And 10 is the minimum. Take as many as you need. It's a digital camera. You're not using film. It's not precious. Like, take 500 if that's what it takes. Don't. I'm just giving you like guidelines. I'm not being like super rigid. I'm purposely not being super rigid because I want you guys to like be creative. So that 10 is like bare minimum, but take more than that if you feel you need to. If you take the 10, but you already know like this is the one, that's fine. But just know that I want at least 10 of each topic, and then you pick the one that you're gonna say like this is my representation of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, types of repetition. So this would be an example of things that are like, you know, in architecture, zebra. That's more basic. When I saw this, I instantly thought of French terry cloth. I don't know if anybody's ever had French terry jeans or like sweats or a sweater, but when you look at it, the stitching just really reminds me of this. And you know, if you get a nice sharp close up of, you know, that kind of a pattern, that's repetition, because these machines are like stitching these weaves in like, you know, mathematical precision, so they're all like super precise, and it repeats. So like that's another example of repetition. There's also repetition in like herds of animals. I know that if you go to San Jacinto campus, there's cows. Like that's, you know, that's a repetition of an animal. Same thing in nature. Things like waves, forests, rocks. Like I said, you're only limited to your imagination. So you can stage it, you can find it in nature. You can walk around a trail and like get most of these actually. Let's see. Another one that is going to be on your list is balance. Balance appears in every photograph we capture, weighing the visual weight on one side of the photo against another. A balance shot will feel pleasing and harmonious. So that's kind of the theory behind it. But essentially, you know, balance is in a photo is symmetry. So one of the types of balance is symmetry. So this is the most common one when we think of balance. So it's an example of a perfect balance of the photo where each side of the image has the same visual weight. So visual weight means amount of object. So if we draw this imaginary line, each side has an equal amount of weight as far as negative space. See how there's a lot of it? That's what we mean by weight, amount of something. So both sides have the equal symmetrical weight of water, of negative space, and the same weight of subject. This is hard to find in nature, so this is going to be more, you might have to stage this one. You can easily find it in architecture, but like I said, like not necessarily in nature. An example of this, this thing totally ruined my shot, but I was there for the weekend, so I shot it. There's an example of the Anthropology Museum in Tijuana. This right here is their 360 Globe Theater. I kind of felt this would be a good example of symmetry. Let's just kind of pretend this block isn't here. Hi.
Okay, sorry for the interruption, but this,
Sorry guys. So yeah, this is an example of symmetry. You know, like if you draw that line in the middle, we have equal visual weight of like, you know, sky, the nice sphere, the I forgot English for a second, stairs. So this would be a good example. This is a passable example. So I want to show you guys that sometimes if we really want a photo and there's an element that is just in the way, it's fine. If you run into something like that, it's okay, because what really matters is, you know, the gestalt, the implied, the what is there already. This would be like a good example of symmetry. And you know what? This is actually a good example of like we can't always get the exact shot we want, and we just have to be okay with that. You can always go back another day. I'm not going to dock your points on the assignment because there is still, you know, considering ratio, this is only 10% of the image. 90% of the image is what I wanted, so that's fine. There's another example, you know, of like trying to have symmetry with the amount of sky and water. So it's like almost equal weights. So my argument for symmetry here was the horizon. And again, I forgot to take off the watermark. But I'm kind of impressed. It's not bad for a pocket camera. The focus is a little weird, but yeah. Anyway, asymmetrical. I believe that's on your list. We'll double check right now. Also known as informal balance. It is the most common compositional technique taught in photography and art workshops, excuse me. It requires intentionally placing your subjects off of the center. So, like I said, you're gonna find this in nature way more easily than not. If not, you can always move things around. I'm not sure if I don't think I got an example of this one because I kind of just really want you to think of this when you do it. Oh, well, I did. Here's like an example of an asymmetrical photo. See how it doesn't really follow like a straight up and down narrative? It's more of a diagonal. So it's not necessarily, you know, it's not straight, it's at an angle. And this also works for complementary colors. So, you know, sometimes you're gonna run into photos that work for more than one criteria, and you're just gonna have to choose which one you want for it. Coincidentally, they were wearing complementary colored t-shirts.
Oh,
But like I said,
wow. Wow.
actually analogous. But yeah, like I said, like have your camera with you, shoot things like throughout the day, and you're gonna like revisit your photos and see, oh, this works for this works this way, this works that way. So yeah, this is asymmetrical, but you know it also counts as complementary colors. So you can, so I like to reiterate, you'll find this accidentally. Does that make sense as far as like asymmetrical? All right. Negative space, I think we've gotten a hold of pretty well because I keep mentioning it on accident. Well, not on accident, just naturally. Negative space defines and emphasizes the main subject of the focus of the photo. Drawing your eye to it provides a breathing room. I don't know if anybody ever seen like Miyazaki movies, like I don't know, Totoro, Spirited Away, those kind of movies. He's very big on breathing space. You're gonna every 5 minutes from like whatever is happening, there's always gonna be some kind of like vista scene with like huge landscapes of like just sky and ground and like maybe one subject, one house, one thing. He's like a master of negative space. And that's, you know, something we can also use visually in photography, is using negative space to our advantage. Because even though like this tree is our subject, we're also giving the tree space to, you know, like breathe, exist, let the viewer see what else is on there, what else in the area that doesn't take away or distract from the image. Like I said, it doesn't clutter or like fill it with stuff. It's literally just like breathing room, empty space. And this is also a good example of like using the rule of thirds to produce that empty space. So is that composition making sense? All right. Oh, I think I use this again as like another example of empty space, having like a bunch of water, a bunch of sky, and just the boats. The boat. If you notice, the boats only are like less than a third of the image. What's really taking over the image is the sky and the water. So types of visual weight. So when looking at a photograph, our eyes are naturally drawn to look at the area of the most visual weight. We talked about weight already with the building. You know how it's like kind of the biggest, roundest thing there, and like it kind of, you can tell that it's a huge, big thing. Like that's an example of weight. It's like what is taking up most of the image, or like, you know, what's the most important thing that stands out in the image. Was that a hand? Okay. So you can have a type of visual weight be contrast. So one of the types is like, you know, like if you have a bunch of like green apples and then you have a bunch of red, I'm assuming these are red apples. You have a bunch of red apples and then you have like a green apple right here in the middle. Like that contrast is, you know, another way of using weight in a photo, because there is a sharp difference between this and the rest of it. Same thing with like faces. Weight can also be size of an image, or like the size of a subject. I guess I reiterated that with like the building. as an example of weight. So like you can tell that this is like a huge thing made of like concrete, and it kind of has the most visual weight in the photo. And then you can also tell that it's like by the scale of a billboard, it's implied that this is a huge thing. There is scale to it. I mean, you can also see like a flag over here. We know what like a flag, you know, we know the general size of a flag, so that gives us also like information on like the scale of an object. So I'm pretty sure one of your photos is scale. So like here, like we can tell the scale of this boat. We know that like the weight, it has the most kind of, it has this and like this boat over here have the most weight in the rest of the image, because all the other boats are like kind of smaller. So it's like weight and scale. Placement, we talked about that. You know, text also gives us, you know, it's a form of context, it's a form of art. It's also good to like learn to, you know, catalog and photograph text that you see like graffiti. It can either contrast an image or complement the environment of which it's in, because, you know, if there's just like a blank wall, grass and sky, it's kind of boring, but you know, the graffiti makes it interesting. Like there's context here, and it's not necessarily always a negative connotation. A lot of the time it's literally an art expression, and it just, you know, it gives a photo kind of more interest. Here's like an example of just like a blank wall versus, you know, the wall with this like art on it. It gives you more like kind of context to like what you're looking at. It also offers a lot of, you know, visual weight, lines. Like if you look at the graffiti itself, there's a lot of like artistic elements in this when it comes to the weight and the width of the lines, the color usage, like the way it's framed, and the complementary colors of it against the background itself. So I mean, this is art, you know, and this is actually good composition too. And then the photo is a good composition of this person's art and composition on the wall. So it doesn't have to be graffiti. It can be text. I believe text is one of your photos. It can be text on like a sign that you thought was interesting. It's just capturing text, you know. Depth of field, we already went through this. But just a refresher. Remember, you guys, how depth of field works. So this is a different kind of a more literal version of depth of field. So when we were talking about like using a wide aperture, remember wide aperture meant shallow depth of field, right? What does shallow depth of field mean again? Sorry? Yeah, wide aperture. But what does it do to the subject in comparison to the background?
Focus on the subject versus the background.
Exactly. So this is a really good visual example of literally shallow depth of field, because only the subject is going to be in this focus. The depth of field is another way of saying your range of focus. So while we're focused on her, if we're super shallow, super wide open, we're only going to get her and not anything in front or in the back of. And then the adverse is true. If it's a very narrow depth of field, if it's a very narrow aperture, so like aperture f16, we actually get the adverse, which is a very deep depth of field. So all of this will be in focus. The only issue that when you get on higher depth of fields is, higher apertures. I still need to wake up, you guys. When you get to these like higher f-stops, higher apertures, you start sacrificing your ability to have like ISO 100 and fast shutter speeds. So you want to consider like a tripod and shoot this like, you know, for like maybe one full second, half of a second, 1/60th of a second. Things that will normally look very bad handheld at the really high apertures, it makes everything look nice, crispy, in focus. It's great. But you know, if you also have a lot of light, like if it's like broad daylight, you can get away with this handheld at like f100 or something. Just you know, be aware. This is like a better example of the depth of fields. because I mean I showed you depth of fields on week 2, like literally through photos, but I thought this is a really good illustration as far as like teaching you how the aperture relates, or its relationship to the focal plane. Does that make sense, you guys? Does that help as well? Like, not just seeing the photo, but seeing like, you know, kind of what's actually happening? All right. Same thing with distance. The closer you are to the focal point, the shallower the depth of field. So let's say you don't have something that's 2.8, which probably a lot of you guys may not because it's a beginning class. You'll have things that are higher, like a 4 or 5, which will be like the most shallow you can go. If this is the case, just get closer. You just literally get closer to the object, or get closer to the subject. And the closer you get to the subject and the farther the background is, you're gonna get the same effect. It's this really only offers you a faster light collection method, and it allows you to be farther away from something. If the widest you go is like 4 and 5, literally just get closer to the subject. You'll be fine. Yeah, same thing over here. If you get farther away from the subject, you'll kind of you can basically emulate like the quickness of like super fast lenses with normal lenses by you moving in and out. That's kind of why I told you guys to get like the 50 millimeter, because it teaches you to do the same thing as far as composition. Because instead of zooming into something, you're literally the one moving in and out because you don't have the ability to zoom. So it really hard teaches you position and like relationship to subject and like photographer and camera. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yes.
Okay. So when we do our depth of field photos, you feel confident as far as like shallow depth of field and like narrow and deep depth of field. Shutter speed, we already went through that, but I found this infographic to kind of, you know, made more sense. You might want to print this, use this, to have this as like a cheat sheet for you, but it's kind of like that flow chart of like, does it move, does it not move, should it move, should it not move? So, you know, for something moving, you like get into this range. These are going to be super fast. You're going to most likely have to bump up your ISO, so they're going to be a little bit grainy, but you know that's okay. The medium speeds are the 160 to 250. These are going to be your handheld. Well, these two are going to be handheld friendly. And then you get into the slow. The slow is like the 115 to the 1 second or beyond. This is shutter speed. I mean, this is tripod territory. This is also best for creative blur, which is another one of your shots. So you're going to want to most likely use a tripod, set it on the ground, set it on your car, set it on something, and put the shutter to like 2 to maybe 10 seconds, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then like if it's like for a 1 second exposure, do like a 5-second counter, place it on something, and then just like let it do the shot. You can capture yourself or somebody moving, like I was showing you guys in the beginning, those cars where you get like the light trails. That would be, you know, doing 1 second on an intersection and like placing the camera on your car or on the tripod, and then focusing and, you know, letting it do its thing there. Another thing people do is like they'll shoot things like waterfalls, or there's a waterfall near us. But there's another cool thing you can do where you can set it to like over a second or two and just like shoot a building, and everybody who's walking by it will like just fade into the background. So there's different ways you can creatively play around with this. I think for beginners, the best thing to play around with as far as your creative blur would be having, I mean, a second or two and just like shoot yourself moving. Like put a 10-second timer and experiment what kind of movement or how fast your movement will affect the photo. Use light. Use like the light on your phone. Move around. You can try moving yourself, but that might also, moving yourself with a camera could be a little disastrous. I would as a beginner, would prefer for you to be creative with your subject. So have the camera be stationary and have the subject move. When you get more comfortable with that, you can try the camera moving. But for your creative blurs, I would prefer capturing the movement of the subject. So like I said, the cart trails or hand trails, like visual movement. When it comes to freezing motion, which is another one of your shots, that's one where it's going to be okay for you to be handheld. You're not going to have to place the camera down, and you're going to go as far as you can get for shutter speed to really just stop whatever is happening. So what's going to happen when we're using those really high shutter speeds is that, I repeat, we're going to have to do what with the ISO? We're going to have to bump the ISO up. And we're going to get grain, and that's okay. But we're going to really have to bump that ISO up because we want that shutter speed to be able to freeze motion. And you don't have to go to 1/4000. Start with like 250, go to 500, start incrementally experimenting. That's why I said 10 was the minimum. You're going to take more than that. You're going to have way more because you're experimenting. You're learning how to do this. So just remember that whatever you're trying to freeze, start at a base point and just keep increasing your speed from there until you freeze it how you want it to be frozen. And then you're going to be using what you learned about the exposure triangle as far as adjusting your ISO and your aperture. So does that make sense as far as freezing motion and blurring? Any questions?
You're saying you need a tripod?
Either a tripod, set it on something, set it on a stable object carefully, preferably a non-moving object that's like a table or like on your backpack or something. I mean, you can have low angles, that's fine. Preferably a tripod. Oh yeah, so just ISOs. I'm gonna have this slide for you guys re-uploaded for this content, so you guys understand how ISO works. The lower it is, the less sensitive it is, and the less noise it will be in the image. So that's appropriate for like sunlight. When you get to more challenging light, like indoors or night, you have to bump it up. But that's going to give you the trade-off of getting more noise. Remember, the lower the ISO, the less noise. The higher the ISO, the more noise. But the more the light, the less we need noise. The less the light, the more we need the sensitivity. So it's kind of like just gonna have to welcome the noise that comes in. So, all right, let's formally talk about Project One. So we're gonna aim for September 10th. It gives you about 3 weeks. So I want a total of 10 photographs for each one of these categories, and then one photo that is your best for each one. So your minimum of like 10 wide depth of field photos, shallow depth of field. You guys understand what those are, correct? Frozen motion, like I said, experiment with how fast you can get away with your shutter speed to freeze motion that you're trying to freeze, because you're not always going to have to go to like 1,000, because that's like for like a moving vehicle. If somebody is running, you can get away with like 2 to like 500 500th of a second. So experiment, like start low, go up until you get the frozen motion you want. So I'm gonna want frozen, I'm gonna want a creative blur, and like I said again, experiment with light, experiment, with cars, experiment with yourself as like a moving target. Just get comfortable with placing it on either, something safe, something stable, a tripod, preferably, please. If that's not available, like carefully putting it on your car or on a table, and angling it to where you get the composition you want. Or like if you're gonna shoot yourself, just angle it the right way, get in front of it, whatever kind of motion you want to have, whatever kind of motion you want to capture. That's gonna be your blur shot. Warm and cool colors. That's what I meant by complementary. Sorry. So warm is gonna be like your reds, your browns, the literal half of the color wheel is going to be the warm colors. The cool colors are going to be everything, blue, green. We'll revisit the color wheel to talk about that again. But you're going to want a photo with complementary colors in it. Yes.
In your earlier lecture, you said monochrome, but I don't see monochrome on the list.
I did have it, but I guess I didn't put it on here. So, forget the monochrome then. We're going to use these ones. It might have been for another assignment, so sorry. When you're designing 3 levels of this, things get a little jumbled. Thank you so much, though. But yeah, so I want the cool colors, the warm colors, the pair of complementary colors, positive, negative space. Remember, we talked about, visual weight. So when it comes to positive space and negative space, the positive space is obviously the subject. The negative space is like the breathing room. So this will be easy if you guys follow the rule of thirds, like have your subject in the rule of thirds spot, and then make sure that there's like breathing space and the other empty space around it.
I have a question again, I'm sorry. Is positive and negative space, do you want one of each, or is this an or situation?
Well, it's I think I worded this out of the book, but it's the same thing
Okay,
because of the fact that your subject is your positive space.
okay, I just wanted to.
And the negative space, you won't hear it mentioned that way, like in contemporary, photography. This is just like like out of book training, like older scholastic kind of terms. But the positive is literally the subject, and the negative space is the opposite of the subject. So the title is positive negative space, but it's really give me a subject with negative space. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay. Balance, like I said, symmetrical or asymmetrical. We saw that already with like the building that's the same on both sides or something. I hope not. I hope I don't get like 30 building images of the same building, but like try to vary it. Try to be different. It doesn't have to be a building. It could be anything that's symmetrical, or asymmetrical. Like I showed you guys they are actually famous artists from Guadalajara called the De La Torre brothers. They have a giant like sculpture at the Cheech Moran Museum in Riverside. I learned glass from them for a year. That was an example of like the asymmetrical photo because like it was like at an angle, and they were working like on a glass sculpture. Scale, like I said, gives us a sense of scale. For example, like that big boat with the little boats around it, the building with a flag next to it. Anything that like lets you visually see that the subject is a different size from another subject in the image. So do you have a question as far as scale? Even having like a person stand in front of a building, it's like there's scale. You see that.
For the scale image, does it have to be of something like big, or can it just be like?
No, you can do small scale. It's you are the creative, I'm just giving you the category that I want, showing you examples of how to do it or what I want, but it's up to you what the subject is. Because you're the one that's going to take minimum 10 of each, pick one of each and say, this is what I chose for this. So you're the one who decides what that is. I'm just telling you what I'm looking for as far as like what the definition of that is. You're telling me this subject fits that criteria because of. So you're choosing what the subject is. And then rhythm and pattern. Rhythm or pattern. I showed you guys like that wood fence. That was an example of like pattern, because it didn't change. And then rhythm was like, the posts that they look symmetrical, but there was breaks in between them. So like I said, one of the photographs per category is required, but I do want to see minimum of 10 of each. And you're gonna end up with like more than 10 of each of these. Anyway, these are just like minimums. But yes.
In shooting in RAW, I know it is larger than
Yeah.
regular. What size of memory card
A good size for a minimum would be 64 gigabytes. That's minimum. If you can do 250, you're gonna be comfortable. Like you do 250, you can have like 700 shots. 64 is enough for shooting like a day worth and then dumping it and then shooting a day worth again and then dumping it. But if you do like 256, they're really affordable, and you don't need them to be like super crazy fast. You can get like the cheaper versions, and it'll be fine. And that'll last you like a bunch of shoots in RAW. They're raw photos typically from like a Canon are going to be about 30 megabytes each, but you have to realize that's 30 like megabytes. When you're comparing that to like gigabytes or terabytes, you're good. It's photos. If this was a video class, I'd be like, yeah, I'm sorry, you guys are gonna have to get like 4 terabyte cards, because video fills up. Video just eats data, but with photos, raw photos, you're fine. As far as your SD card, 64 to 120, 500, that's all good range. What you do want though is a terabyte, maybe minimum, external device. That's what's going to hold your Lightroom catalog, and that's what we're going to get into in a bit. Yes.
One thing I'm still kind of stuck on is the warm colors or cool colors.
Oh, warm colors, cool colors. Let's go back to the color wheel. So if you guys have never heard of warm and cool colors, think of it like this. There's like an imaginary line right here. Everything that's reddish or red adjacent is warm. Everything that's like bluish, greenish adjacent is considered cool. It's kind of really that simple. Browns, reds, yellows, oranges.
So you take a picture.
Think of like fire. What colors are in fire? Yellow, red, orange. That's warm colors. Think of like what's something cool, like ice. Ice is gonna be like whites, blues, greens. I can like argue like look at the ocean. It's not actually blue. It's really green. Does that kind of make sense as far as warm and?
Take a picture that generally has those colors in it, right?
Sorry.
You're trying to take a picture that has like kind of colors.
Yes, exactly. So, like I said, here's an example of. Here's a good example. You can argue that this complementary. This would be an example of like a cool and warm color. Because the purple is considered like a cool color and the yellow is considered a warm color. So you have, this would be your cool and warm. Does that make sense? And again, it's up to you to you're the one deciding like this is my cool and warm. If ultimately you need to edit the color a little bit, we'll go through that on Lightroom. And you can make it whatever kind of color you want it to be. So I can show you guys how to do that too. If you have something that's like not just the wrong hue, but you really like the photo, we can manipulate it. And I can show you guys how to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And like, again, like this is an example of cool and warm tones. The greens would be the cool tones and like the reds are the warmer tones. And this is like, this is also in nature. Does that make sense? Any questions as far as that? No? Okay. So moving on. Okay. So I didn't talk about this yet, but because we're going to go through the Lightroom demo together. We're gonna sort the photos. We're gonna learn how to sort the images, build your catalog, and we're gonna learn how to export. So once we export the 10 images, or once you learn how to export the 10 images, because we're gonna go through that today, I'm gonna also show you guys, if there's time, how to make a contact sheet, and then that's gonna be part of your deliverables. So after today, you can go back and revisit the video because I'm recording this as a video. And kind of follow it, go through it, because I'm going to show you guys how to do it. But take notes, and then you have this video to show you again how to do it. We're gonna we're gonna learn how to export a photo, and then we're also gonna learn how to make a contact sheet. And that's kind of what you're gonna upload on Canvas. I haven't made it available to upload yet because you guys shouldn't really have anything to upload yet, anyways. But that's how we're gonna be submitting it. We're gonna be submitting it through Canvas, and it's gonna be a PDF of what is called a contact sheet. A contact sheet's gonna have basically all your images on it, like a sampler, and then we're gonna do 10 JPEGs, and that's gonna be uploaded onto Canvas. For my online students, you're probably gonna use OneDrive. Let's see, I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. And then it's just a very small statement due the following Monday, because we're gonna do critique, and then critique is gonna be your chance to tell us all, this is what I did, this is why I did it. After critique, you're just gonna give us like a small reflection or statement. I don't have that open yet because we're not there yet. But once we're there in the module, there's gonna be a place for you to upload your photos and upload the small reflection. And that's it for project 1. Any questions? Cool. Let's go ahead and take a break now. And let's say a 15-minute break. Everybody come back at 10:30, 10:25. We're gonna do a live. And you all have a space for your SD card. Make sure it's facing you and put it into the Mac Studio. They haven't popped out yet? Did you put it all the way in? Try to okay. So I know we get greeted with like this pop-up, but let's not worry about that for right now. Go to cancel. Go ahead and close Lightroom 2. So I just want you guys to have your medium in there, your storage device as well. Go ahead and open up your storage device and just make a new folder and call it Lightroom. So this is pretty much all the setup you need for your external. Now, we're gonna go into Lightroom Classic, click on Lightroom. So everybody just open up Lightroom, don't import anything yet, just open up the main screen. I want us to get familiar with it. When we're gonna be importing photos, the import button is down here at the bottom, but we're not gonna do that yet. What we're all gonna do is first go to File, New Catalog, and name your catalog. You know, are we in spring or fall? We're in fall.
Now fall.
Call it photo fall 20. Are we in 25 or 26? 25. All right, sorry you guys. And you are going to put that folder, I'm putting it on the desktop, but you're going to put that folder in your medium, your external hard drive, which is going to show up over here on locations. So for right now, I'm putting it on the desktop. I'm making a folder called Photo 425. And then, all right, create. So once you create it, it's going to close Lightroom and reopen it. What I just did was I created a private file that I can carry around with me anywhere, and it's gonna have all the photos I imported, it's gonna have all my edits, all my everything, and I'm gonna be able to open this on any computer and not worry about my files being on that computer or using that computer storage. Because what we just did is create a file on our external drive that's gonna hold our entire library. All we need the computer for is to access Lightroom to edit and manipulate them. So just reiterating one more time. We have our storage medium on our computer, like our external drive. We're opening up Lightroom, and before we import anything, we're setting up ourselves to be able to use it later on any computer or like from now on. So that's going to be making up a catalog. So we go to the new catalog, we find our external drive, which is going to be in locations over here where you see my mouse. And then we click on our drive, and that drive is going to have, the folder we made called Lightroom, or call it whatever you want, photo fall. And then you hit create. When you hit create, it's going to close and reopen. And at that instant, you are now using your personal new Lightroom catalog. The cool thing about that is I can close Lightroom, like whatever, it's no big deal. And I'm pretending the desktop is my storage device. You're gonna go into your storage device, and then you're gonna click on your folder that we made called Fall. And this right here, this is gonna be your baby now, from now on. It's called Cat for catalog, your Lightroom catalog. So this is what you click on any computer that has Lightroom installed on it. You're going to be able to open it, and this is going to be your private personal catalog that it's going to hold all of your photos, all of your edits, and you can make different catalogs for different things, like a wedding. You make a wedding catalog, make a product catalog if you want, but just have this be your main catalog that you're going to be using for the rest of the semester. So, does everybody have their catalog open? Yes?
We like where it says like
It's loading?
LRC cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that page for it.
So the fall should say, the on top of Lightroom, it should say, our title. We titled it Photo Fall 25.irccat. That's also how you know what catalog you are in. So that's important to know. Now, next we're going to talk about importing. So we just learned how to make our catalogs. Now we're going to fill our catalog. So we're going to go down here to where it says import. Everybody see it? Bottom left corner. And try to maximize your screens. That really kind of helps too. So you hit import, and we're gonna find our external hard and our SD card that we put into the computer, and/or for the guys who don't have their SD card but have their photos on the desktop or something like that, you can find it over here. So because I have the SD card logged in, it says EOS Digital. And then this allows me to get into the SD card, and this is where the subfolders of the SD card are. Because I only need to click on this one and not the subfolders, it opens up what's in the folders for me. By default, everything is going to be checked. Maybe you don't want everything checked. So you can always uncheck all and then check them one at a time. Like I'm doing right here.
Do we have time to do that right now?
Sorry?
Do we have time to look through right now, or can we just install it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do we have time to look through it and check it out?
And he's asking, can he check through now, or should he wait? Should
Check.
he go through and check what he wants, or uncheck?
Oh yeah, here, I'll give you guys a minute. Like, check the ones you want. I'll show you in a sec. Because when you're importing, it's gonna allow you to pick what you want to import. And you know what, you guys, for the purposes of this exercise, just put check all, it's fine. So now that we have our photos checked that we want to import, we want to go to the top right, and where it says file handling, open that, and just leave everything like by default. Don't import expected duplicates is always good. Build the smart previews. That's not bad to have. It saves you space. Some people have what are called RAID units or redundancy storage. This is more of an advanced thing for people in that like to make backups of their images. You don't need to know that yet. We can go over this like in intermediate or advanced. But what I find is my favorite thing to do in Lightroom whenever I import is I like to make a collection. So always click on Add Collection, and then we hit the plus. What this is going to do is that it's going to start letting you create little subfolders for all your imports. So I'm going to name this collection, what the date is today. Let's put August 26th, because this is the day that, I imported it. It also lets you, put it into smart collections, sub collections. Don't worry about that yet. But just name your collection and make it the target collection. So you then you press create. So now you have this collection that has your name.
Anything in the
I mean the name that we named it. File renaming. Here, if you want to rename the files, it will automatically rename everything. Either like file name, custom name allows you to put in a word. X of Y sequence if you want them to be renamed. Photo 1 through whatever. Yes.
I don't have that selection, I don't have
You have
rename
to-
file and stuff
You
like
have to
that.
click on the rename files and it pops up.
So you have you have
That's
to.
what mine did. Mine was grayed out at first.
I don't see it though.
You don't see file rename on yours?
No.
I don't think I see that.
Are you in like requested?
I'm not- yeah, I don't think so. I have everything into-
That is peculiar. What? You have add, that's why.
Oh, I'm not add.
You want to do copy.
Okay.
You got the same.
There you go.
That's it.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, guys. Also, make sure you're in the when you're importing. Always use the copy, because you're copying what's on the SD card to the catalog. You can copy as digital negatives, but most of the time we're going to be using RAWs anyway, so they're already digital negatives. Yeah, make sure it's copy. Move and add are kind of more advanced. We don't need to worry about these. We just need to worry about copying what's in our storage medium, from our SD cards to the catalog location, which for you guys would be your external drive, or for me, the desktop. So that's where we're gonna copy to the catalog. So back to over here. We do build smart previews. This is optional. It just kind of saves you RAM on your computer. Don't import duplicates. We want that. Secondary copies we only worry about when we have a backup unit. So don't worry about that right now. But we did make a collection. We named the collection and we made that the target. So going back to file renaming. Now that you see file renaming, you have the option to rename them or leave them as is. It's up to you. We'll leave them as is for now. But if you do want to, like I said, you have the option to give them all a custom name, original sequence number, sequence, or I'll give you an example. Custom name and then X of Y. So the custom text, I'm gonna put my initials, PA. And then they're all gonna be now called PA starting at number 1 to whatever. And then the extensions, we leave that as is. Apply during import, don't touch that. That's a little more custom. And then the destination, it's basically going to tell you that it's going to where we. Oh wait, 1 second. For destination, make sure you are also in your external drive.
all my photos got deselected.
Sorry?
All the photos they got deselected.
They're getting deselected?
Yeah.
Did you already import those same photos?
Yes.
So it's marking them, for example, it's marking them as duplicates, so it's not gonna let you import them. Because or else you have doubles of the photos you already have in. So if you were following the demo, you would be creating a new catalog and not working with your existing catalog.
Yes. Photo filtering.
Yeah, so for the purposes of this demo, try making a new catalog. Anyway, and then we hit import.
Excuse me?
Yes.
So for the destination, would that be like
The fall of 2025. So once we hit import, boom, we have now our first library. So the thing about your catalog is that you're gonna have this tab that's all photos. So every photo you ever import is just gonna amass here. And this is gonna get really heavy, really hectic, really crazy, really quickly. That's why what we did was we made a collection down here in collections, and we have our collection that we can click on that's August 26. This way, every time you make a new import and you make a new collection for that import, they'll be sorted down here, and you can just go like day by day or import by import. So this keeps everything nice and organized. I would suggest always importing and making a new collection per import. And like I said, it could be anything. It could be labeled like the day of, or like photo shoot one, or like, you know, wedding one, event one, whatever you want. It just makes it easier to find them later. Because when you open up your catalog for all photos, it's gonna just literally be your entire collection of images. Are we all on this step?
No, I'm.
Let's see.
It's important that you have this catalog.
Okay, so
All right, now that we successfully imported, did that make sense? Was that like a smooth import transition? That makes sense. You know, we made our catalog, we imported our images into our catalog, we made a collections folder to keep our images organized, and now we're here. This is, oh, sorry, did you have somebody? Okay. Let me hydrate. Once we're in this step, now that we're imported, we have different options we can work with up here on the top right. So library is going to be, you know, managing and sorting your files. But then when we go to over here to develop and click on that, you might get greeted with a nice little tutorial template, which is kind of nice. This works for educational reasons. So when we go into develop mode, if you notice the first box is being highlighted, and it says basic. These are going to be your global edits, your basic corrections. This is where, as beginners, I want us to really only play around with this area first. This is, you know, the develop module is where you do your edits for your photos. It is a basic panel, make adjustments like white balance, exposure, contrast. We're going to go into that. This is going to be like the main thing I want you guys to experiment with after I let you guys go. Well, I mean, obviously let you guys go to experiment on your own with your photos. All right. See, on the bottom, the film strip is our navigation for our images. So it's kind of cool that, you know, it's a film strip. It's an homage to like film photography. This is where you're going to be able to select them one by one. The film strip is on the bottom, allows you to navigate all the images in the selected folder. Oh, it articulated it better than I did. You can copy and paste settings in between the photos. We'll go over that. But, you know, because you're beginners, don't copy the settings. Try to work with each one individually. Right here is the cropping location adjustment panel. So this is where we're gonna do crops. And this is the kind of how I kind of called it like ethical AI, because it's just algorithmic editing. This would be like, you know, basic spot removal, patching. We'll go over how to do that a little bit. But the main thing is cropping. So this is where you would want to go to if you want to crop your image. And then Lightroom is non-destructive. Oh yeah, so non-destructive editing means that whatever we do to a photo here doesn't necessarily at all affect the original raw image. What you are doing is you are creating a file with all the edits on it. Basically, it's going to be your cooking instructions. So think of the raw as your raw ingredient. The raw image is your raw ingredient, and then all the edits you do to it is basically like your recipe. It's a separate file that gets saved in your catalog that's tied to that image. So nothing actually happened to that image yet. Everything you're doing here is creating basically like a recipe for the image. And then when we do our export, that's when it cooks it. That's when it gives you, the result with the instructions you gave it to do to it. Does that make sense? So you're non-destructively editing. Anything that you export isn't tied to the original. You always have your original is always safe. So you're never actually like harming the original image. And you can always look at the history. It goes up to like so many steps, but worst case scenario, you can always re-import the raw. Try different looks with snapshots. That's we probably won't really mess around with that because you guys should really try to experiment on your own first before relying on filters. Same thing with presets. You can play around with presets if you like, but things that you turn into me, I really would prefer you to have done yourself. Like don't rely on presets. So now that we have that cool little tour that it gave us, we can, start with our first global edit. I took some random photos, as you can see. Let me try this one. So the film strip on the bottom is going to let you scroll through your images. Your navigator over here is going to give you a preview of what you're looking at. When you find something you want, like for example, I'm choosing this one right here. We click on it and it shows us the raw image. The navigator can also be used to, zoom into specific parts by clicking on it. So if you want to really magnify into like a certain part and like, what they call pixel peeping, or just really see the full 100% of your image, this is what 100% scale of the image looks like on my computer. So you're able to navigate around it like this. You can also tell Lightroom to let you see the full image to where it fits naturally on the computer by pressing fit. Or, fill, which is going to be 100% magnified photo. So 100%, remember, is the true size of your image. And then fit is just going to be, fitting edge to edge the entire image in one screen. Does that make sense on how to use that? Over here is your histogram. Your histogram is going to be really important to understand how to read. It's going to show you basically the amount of data, the color data of the image. And it's a spectrum of blacks and whites. The blacks and shadows are mathematically represented as higher points of data. So there's like a lot of the darker a photo is, technically the heavier the photo is. Like the more data that's in it, the wider a photo is. See how it said 0 on the bottom of that? That's like 0 points of data. So like if you have a really blown out image or really bright image, a lot of the time it's like it's almost going to be smaller. For general uses, it's not a rule of thumb, but a lot of the time, generally it's okay to have an underexposed image because of the fact that, as you can see, we didn't really peak. We're like, we have a good chunky amount of data right here. It's kind of dark. We can always work with that and like brighten it. We can bring this over here and make it a more balanced exposure, a more correct exposure. And we're gonna be able to do that because it's darker, because it has more data points in it for us to be able to manipulate. If it was the opposite, let's say the image was what they call blown out, a lot of too many hot white spots, has 0 points of data color, and that means we can't pull anything out of that. So anything that's like burnt, essentially like blown out, I can't darken it because there is no data color to manipulate. So that's where, worst case scenario, it's always better to maybe underexpose one stop. If you only have if you had to choose an image that you want to correct, you have more points of data over here to play with. Now, your goal always for proper exposure is to have the peaks kind of centered. That's how you know that's like your rule of thumb, proper exposure, that you have a balance of like white and black, light and darkness. We're pragmatic, we balance, we We walk both paths of the light and dark in photography. So we want to kind of stay here. So what's one way to achieve this? Well, that's where we go into our global edits. This guy right here, we don't touch him. Automatic, you know, you could always kind of use it to see how far you went or how close you were to a proper exposure. Automatic is just going to weigh all the averages and make it, you know, an averagely exposed, mathematically correct image. But, you know, we kind of know better. We know how we wanted it to be exposed. So we kind of always want to do that ourselves. So because this is underexposed, looking at the options we have here, we have temperature, remember, the blues and like the yellows, the cools and the warmer tones. Who can tell me what kind of tones we have in this photo?
Warm.
So if we wanted, you know, to make a traditional proper composition, we want a balance, right? So if they're too warm, what would we do with the temperature to kind of correct that?
Cool it off.
We would cool it down. So cooling down is getting your little slider right here, and, you know, just kind of moving it slightly down. And you see already that's looking a little more natural. See, the warmth really cooled down. The color of the panels looks more realistic. You can also kind of achieve this with this guy right here. He's gonna be your best friend 90% of the time when you're doing your own edits. This guy, you want to sample. It lets you. It's an eye drop, but it lets you sample a white point. So the other way to get, you know, that proper color is to sample what is called a white point of an image. A lot of the time you're going to get better results with something gray or gray like toned. Remember we talked about shades, tints, and tones? The tones are always like the gray, the added gray to the color. So if you find anything gray, any kind of tone, it also kind of works as that white point. So I want to say that the walls are pretty gray. If you look outside, like, that's kind of gray to me. It's a little bit cool here, but we know that's gray. So we can sample that. And, well, you know, technically it's telling us that this is proper. But, you know, I say this is more accurate. So that's where you can always, like, mess around with that yourself. There's not exactly a cast on this. A lot of times, because of coatings on our lenses, we'll get what's called a color cast, which most of the time is going to be either magenta or green. And it has a lot to do with like either atmospheric conditions or the way that the coatings on your lenses react to just certain light reflections. Whenever you get that, you correct that by changing this. So like let's say you have a magenta color cast, like for some reason your photo comes out kind of looking like this, straight out of camera. You know what we learned about color theory, the opposite, the complement. What do we do to kind of correct that?
Go towards the green.
Exactly. So we start going to its complement until, oh, we hit another cast. So we want to just have that happy medium. And I want to say it's like kind of right here. So there was no cast to begin with, so it was fine how it was. But just so you know, if you ever have like that magenta cast or that green cast, you want to correct that here. Now, the other main issue in the photo overall is what? That it's kind of underexposed, right? So that's where you have exposure. This is going to increase the stops of light. So it's almost like, think of it as like a ISO you can edit that won't necessarily hurt or add noise. So because it's underexposed, we want to, increase the exposure. And as we subtly increase the exposure, look what's happening to the histogram. Can you guys tell me what's happening to it? It's going towards the center. And remember, the center is like our balanced exposure. And as I do that, our image does get brighter, but oh no, now what happened? I'm in the middle, but I had some hot spots, so they got blown out. And it shows me right here. Anything that, if you touch this over here, whatever is red reached 0. You never want to reach 0. 0 is like you messed up. So I can't really just only do the exposure. So I'm gonna have to find, you know, kind of like a balance of exposure where I'm not blowing out the image. The other thing that is I can correct right here are like the highlights. The highlights from the window are pretty hot, but because we didn't hit 0, we did hit 0. So because we hit 0, there's going to be parts of that image we're not going to be able to save, but we can always bring down the highlights of it, and it increases that visibility. Another thing we can do is kind of correct for the shadows of the vignetting. For some reason, this lens has a little bit of vignetting, so we can kind of reduce those shadows and brighten up the image just a little bit. And then what this does is this increases data points of, remember how I said like in black and white have data point values? This adds to those values. So anything that's already white, it'll add points of data to the white, or it'll remove points of data of the white. So because those hotspots are a little too hot, we can remove some of the white and still get like a really good image, or acceptable image. Same thing with the black. Because we reduced a lot of the black data points, we can kind of put those back in a little bit. See, if we remove data points, you know, it looks washed out. But we had to remove data points, you know, to get that proper exposure. So we can put some of them, we can add them back in. I know it says minus, but like you're adding black points. What we did minus was white. We reduced the white points. At this point, contrast is the other thing we can play around with. So remember, the contrast is, you know, the difference between two values that are next to each other. So if we increase the contrast, you know, things kind of should like look sharper. And if we reduce the contrast, things like look softer, but you also start losing that definition between like color points. So, you know, kind of leave the contrast alone. These are new redesigned versions of what they used to be. It's kind of like an enhanced sharpness. So whenever you're messing around with texture, this might be a bad example, but let's see. There's not really something with texture here. Ooh, oh no. So texture works better, you know, like on skin tones, on plants, on wood. What about this guy? That's not necessarily texture. Well, bad example, but let's say the wall. One thing we notice is that there's some noise, but we can work on that in a second. What the texture is going to do is that it's going to sharpen the image in certain points. So if you have a lot of noise, it's going to make it look worse. It'll make it even like color noise. You can reduce the texture to kind of soften. So, you know, softening kind of helps with the noise. Let's see what it does to the image overall. And it makes it really blurry, so we don't want that. Clarity, same thing. It manipulates the sharpness. So it's either going to make everything really soft, or it's going to sharpen everything a little too much. Dehaze, same thing. Dehaze is mostly for like atmospheric conditions. So if you shoot a mountain range, the farther the mountain is, the more oxygen, you know, molecules there are technically between you and the mountain, which is kind of why it like looks blue, but also you get kind of that haze in the background. This helps you a lot more with that kind of like atmospheric noise to get rid of it. So you really only mess around dehazing with like outdoor, you know, landscapes. Some of the outdoor photos you guys have, you can play around with this. You'll get like nice results. And the vibrance and saturation. The saturation is gonna dictate the amount of color that's in it. So, you know, you can go straight up to like no saturation, to like hyper saturation. We kind of just want to keep this balanced. Same thing with vibrance. So while saturation controls the amount of color there is, the vibrance controls the tint and shade and the intensity of the color. So those are a little more advanced. You don't want to play around with them too much, but just so you know, like those are there. We also have the crop feature over here. the crop is going to either be, you know, free or it's going to be locked to a certain aspect. So right now how it says original right here, the crop is going to let you to automatically, like, you know, square an image. If you know that you're going to print a certain size, it's easier, you know, to crop for the print size that you're going to do. So it lets you be more exact so you don't have to guess or cut later because it'll already print at that ratio. But for right now, you know, original's fine. You can also, while it's unlocked, manipulate the crop yourself by dragging and dropping. So let's say I only wanted, you know, this half of the image. I would select the crop I want and then hit enter on the computer. And then I have the crop I want. But I changed my mind. I don't want this crop anymore. What you can always do is on your keyboard, press Command Z and it undoes. So keep in mind you can only undo so many times in a row. But I mean, it'll give you at least like 10 chances. Let's say I want that crop again. Let's say you get to a point where you don't know what you did and the photo is like, oh my god, this isn't what I wanted, it's kind of crazy, I don't know what to do, I'm out of redos or undos. You can always just hit reset and it gives you the photo, it takes the photo right back where it was, back to its raw form. And then, I mean, if you feel the need to or just kind of want to see how off you were, that's when I would allow you to hit auto, but don't turn anything, you know, necessarily auto. So algorithmically, the computer is telling me like, hey, well, it was a little too dark. So this is what it thinks. It would say that the proper exposure is. So I wasn't too far off. Yeah. I mean, you can use it that way, like to see how far off you were from a mathematical, you know, correctness. Now, if you run into stuff like this, like the noise, you want to come down to, let's see, we don't want to mess around with curves yet. Mixer, color grading, detail. In detail, you can start doing what's called denoising. Oh, wait, I think that's an automatic. This is a new feature that it looks like it's using an algorithm to denoise it for us. I have mixed feelings so far about you using algorithm tools, but you know, I mean, it did a good job for us. So
When you click on that, you do that, because mine didn't do that.
it's called in details.
I'm in details, yes.
Denoise was declicked, was unselected.
Oh, I see how that was.
Apparently now it just automatically does it for you. It used to not. You used to have to manually get in here and like do the slider. I think this is what this means. Raw detail. Oh no. Wow, it's all automatic now. All right, well, these are our tools. Our tools change and evolve, and this is an example of denoising that we apparently don't necessarily have too much control over now, because it's not letting me. I think it's letting me dictate how much it does it automatically. So this used to be 100% manual. I'm sorry, you guys. So this is one of the
Mine is allowing me to do it.
interesting. What did you?
click on denoise
I
first,
clicked
and
on
then
it.
it allows you to
Yeah.
change it.
Click on it.
Yeah.
It allows you
So,
to like the certain
once
amount
it-
that you want.
Well, it's kind of algorithmic, but I mean, that's fine. I guess the control we have now is letting it decide how much. So yeah, so you can control. You let it. You let it kind of. It's gonna be doing it automatically, but you tell it how much you want it to denoise. So 50% was fine.
There's a spot that says manual noise reduction.
Oh, okay. There you go. Ah. So, old man complaint. They rearranged it. Adobe likes to move things around every like 3 years. So if something's not exactly where it was last time, there's an example of that happening. So here we go. Color noise we want to do when there's like, what we have right here was like monochromatic noise. So the regular noise reduction was fine. Sometimes you're gonna have noise that's like rainbowish, that's when you mess around with the color noise, and that'll really like reduce it. And this is a bad example for color noise, so just know that if you have color noise, that's an option. Lens correction is something you always kind of want to do. It's going to remove what are called vignettes and distortion. The lens I have is it's an L series. All right. If you have like nice lenses, you're not going to have distortion, but you are going to have vignetting. So it's good to always tell it to, enable profile correction. Lightroom is going to have a profile for like every single manufacturer and lens. So it'll automatically do it for you. Like I shot from a Canon, the lens is a Canon. It's an EF 24-105 L series, as you can see. And the program already had the profile for it. If and when you buy an art lens would be like a third-party lens, or maybe a lens that's very, very, very new, or just so third-party that Adobe doesn't have an official profile for it. You will manually have to adjust the distortion. So like the barrel distortion, if it's blown out, you're gonna move it to like the appropriate amount that you need to not have that distortion in the image. Most of the distortion from the lens is gonna be prominent like in the center or the edges. But did you guys see how that profile fixed the vignetting we had automatically? Because it knows that lens will have a little bit of vignetting. Also, the lens does very slight distortion right here in the middle. Because it already knows how the lens reacts and at what focal length, it automatically knows how to correct that. So make it a point to always do your lens correction. Here's like also the manual mode, but you guys are 99% of the time you're gonna be good with this. Same thing with chromatic aberration, doesn't always happen, but when you're taking like a lot of fine details, you'll have what's called chromatic aberration, which means like the light kind of split into different color like channels. So you'll have like spikies of like a leaf that go into like red and blue, and to correct that automatically, we just hit remove color chromatic aberration. How are we, guys? Making sense? We're good? All right. We have 30 minutes left about. I want you guys to play around with it. I'm going to walk around, see if we have any questions. I really want you guys to get comfortable with like global edits.